saying, quote, make them riot. And another Trump staffer is quoted overhearing Trump telling family members, it doesn't matter if you won or lost the election, you still have to fight like hell. But some of the most fascinating new information involves the interaction between Trump and his vice president, Mike Pence, based in part on 5 pages of Pence's contemporaneous notes that were not available to the January 6th congressional inquiry. The filing describes how Pence tried to gradually and gently talk Trump into accepting the results of the election, and how Trump turned on Pence after it became clear he was not going to stop the congressional certification on January 6th. It describes in detail a moment when Trump was sitting in the White House, I think as you described it, watching the Capitol riot on TV, as aides rushed in to tell him that Pence was in danger and had been rushed to a secure location. And it says that these aides were hoping that Trump would take action to rescue his vice president, but it quotes Trump as saying, as you said there, so what? The bottom line here, Jose, is that anyone who's interested in this subject knows the broad outlines of what happened here, but this filing offers some powerful new details.
Ken, do we know what's behind to make that decision to unseal it yesterday, and why specifically it was unsealed yesterday?
Yes, and it's important to point out the special counsel did not make this document public. The judge did by unsealing it. It was sealed. It was filed sealed. Now, Donald Trump and his allies and even some independent analysts have been saying that Smith could have or should have asked for a delay weeks ago so that this would not be happening so soon before election. But current and former DOJ officials I talked to say they really didn't have a choice here, and that nothing they've done here in any way violated the unofficial policy of not taking new discretionary action close to an election. Remember, these guys were ready to go to trial in this case in January. And obviously, the Supreme Court's immunity ruling required a reappraisal. And the Supreme Court instructed the judge to figure out what was private and what was official. And the judge then told the parties to brief on that. Once that process was set in motion, it led to where we are today. If Jack Smith had asked the court to delay, one, it's not clear she would have agreed. And two, he would have been criticized by the other side as putting a thumb on the scale in that direction, Jose.
And so, Temadayo, what's your reaction to when you were actually able to study these 165 pages?
Well, I'd say first, I mean, it really follows the contours of our investigation on the January 6th committee. So I'm not shocked by anything here. And it does confirm the story that we told, which is that the former president knew that these lies he was telling about the election to the American people were all false, and he proceeded nonetheless. What I was a bit taken aback by in a good way was how Jack Smith has been able to use his tools as a federal prosecutor, tools that we didn't have. I previously was a federal prosecutor, and the power of the grand jury subpoena is something that the committee couldn't use. And what he could do here was force people to sit with him in a way that we couldn't. One of those people here is former Vice President Mike Pence. And the detailed communications he has between Pence and Trump are going to be really powerful testimony at trial. And they do what clearly Jack Smith is focused on, which is the mens rea, which means a state of mind, which is critical to proving guilt at trial. And he's done that here. He shows again and again that Trump knew he was lying. And Mike Pence is going to be a critical witness if this ever goes to trial.
And I'm just thinking, you know, those 5 pages that Ken was talking about that the then vice president, took contemporaneously as this whole event was unfolding. And also the Jack Smith mentioning that they were able to determine what the former president, what the then president was doing on his phone during those hours. That's kind of access to information that you all just simply couldn't have.
That is correct. And we were both limited by our time pressures, but by our tools. And Jack Smith has done exactly what we expected the DOJ to do, which is to go further than we could.
So, Danny, when you're looking at this, and especially from a defense perspective, those are a lot of tools that are very effective.
Yeah, and I'm really glad Temadayo is here, because this goes to what I was thinking as I read this, which was I didn't see a whole lot of new factual nuggets that blew me away, that were blockbuster. To me, everything that was new was kind of consistent with what we've largely known over the last several years. So, for example, finding out that when Donald Trump is told that Mike Pence is in danger and he says something as callous as, so what? Didn't surprise me. I would have expected Donald Trump to say something like that. So as I'm reading this, I think about the dual mission. The first mission for the government is establish that these are private acts and not official presidential conduct. But secondly, they've laid out their entire case. And I can't tell you how rare that is, not just for a criminal defense attorney or a defendant, but the public to get a preview of the government's case, especially in a complex case like this. This is not a drugs and guns case. This is a very complicated case, and the government, in 100-plus pages, has laid out essentially their entire case with what I would call less redactions than I expected. The people are redacted for the most part, but we can kind of divine who they are. So for me, it was the legal argument I found compelling. Yes, the quotes and the texts and the messages, what Bannon says about Pence's lawyer, it's flashy. But to me, the legal argument, the way the special counsel lays out that the executive branch's duty is not to be involved in state and local elections, even citing Abraham Lincoln, going through history and explaining how this is not the role of the executive. This is the role of other branches. He had no business in this area.
Yeah, and if you just kind of leaf through some of it, you look at the majority of the redactions are really in the footnotes, right? Where it's kind of to qualify who the individual is or not, but there are very little, very little of the actual text. And so, Temadayo, let's talk about, and I was just asking earlier, Ken, about the timing of this, right? Why do you think that the judge decided to release this now? And there is a difference between what the judge decided to do and what the DOJ could have suggested or not.
Well, the delay here, or the timing, is all because of the former president. It is because of Trump. He has sought, and successfully, to delay this case again and again and again. This case could have been resolved much, much earlier, but for the obstruction through legal processes of the former president. So I think to look at Judge Chutkan or the DOJ here, I think is misguided for anyone to do. And we must remember, the public has a right of access to the court system. The public has a right to understand in any case what's happening, and especially in a case of this kind of national importance. So we should actually be happy that this has been unsealed, because the public should have this information.
The question is, it's when it is unsealed, and there is no doubt a fact that we're less than 30 days away from an election.
Well, as I think Judge Chutkan said at one of his first court appearances, the former president, he is defendant Trump in front of her, not President Trump. The fact that in his private capacity he's seeking another office, that is his choice. First and foremost, he must answer for the crimes he's being charged with.
And so, Danny, how are you seeing this from a defense perspective? What do you think are the main arguments to rebut these 165 pages?
Sure. Thinking like a defense attorney, one of the things you'll expect is, number one, they'll argue that, hey, all these terrible things that people are saying, make them riot, do it, cause trouble at a polling facility. Those were other people. And Donald Trump is clever enough that he doesn't create a whole lot of a digital trail in terms of text messages, emails, all the things that traditionally, and Temadayo could tell you this as a prosecutor, these are the things that sink defendants in the modern age. And Trump, you're not going to find a whole lot of that other than his Twitter activity. So you're probably going to see a defense, at least at trial, that these were things other people said and did. They didn't do it at my direction. That's for trial, at least in the immediate, because now the mission is show the court that these were official acts. So the argument with Pence is clear. You're going to say, hey, even if it had to do with the campaign, I'm a president talking to my vice president, therefore the presumption lies, because the presumption is that communications with Pence will be immune. The government just thinks they can overcome those presumptions, and they've done a really good job of making that argument. So that's going to be the defense's argument essentially here. Yeah, it may have sounded like it was about the campaign, but here's some element of presidential official conduct. We're immune.
Ken Dilanian, Danny Savalas, Temadayo Oganga-Williams, thank you all so very much for being with us this morning. In 90 seconds, we're going to speak to someone who was in the room while some of these events were occurring. Mark Short, thanks for being with us. He was Mike Pence's chief of staff during the 2020 election. He's going to be with us in just 90 seconds. We're going to ask him if he can confirm any of these new revelations. Plus, new Israeli airstrikes in Lebanon as Israel prepares an attack against Iran as retaliation for Iran's attack on Israel. We're going to go live to Beirut and here at home. We'll go live to see the disaster caused by Hurricane Helene. We'll talk to a sheriff in North Carolina who is helping in the recovery efforts by air, land, and water in small mountain towns desperately asking for help. You're watching Jose Díaz-Balart Reports on MSNBC.
Only Purple's Gel Flex Grid passes the raw egg test. No other mattress cradles your body and simultaneously supports your spine. Memory foam doesn't come close. Get your best sleep guaranteed. Buy more, save more. Up to $600 off. Visit purple.com or a store near you.
Millions of people have lost weight with Noom, like Lauren, who unlocked the power of protein with Noom GLP-1 Companion.
I absolutely loved the protein tracker. I have everything in one spot on my phone. It's a whole shift in my mindset. Now I've gotten in the routine of Noom. If I come off of the GLP-1, it's not going to automatically make my weight yo-yo back. I'm going to have good skills and know what to do to take care of myself. I'm Lauren, and I've lost 22 pounds with Noom.
Get Noom GLP-1, now available at Noom.com.
Who am I?
Who am I?
I'm an anchor at MSNBC.
I am a passionate journalist.
I am curious and committed.
I am a great listener, and I have a lot of questions. I'm Cuban American.
A lover of world cuisine, especialmente comida mexicana.
I am bilingual and bicultural.
I am a proud Latina.
I am
All that
I am
Hispanic heritage,
celebrating all that we are.
"13 past the hour," returning to our top story, the court filing from Special Counsel Jack Smith's office, the most exhaustive account yet of the former Vice President Mike Pence's interactions with Donald Trump after the 2020 election. Interactions which Smith argues were done in a private capacity as running mates, not as official presidential conduct. Let's speak with someone who was with the former Vice President on the 6th of January, his former Chief of Staff, Mark Short. Marks, thank you so much for being with us this morning. You were in the room for so many of these incidents, including in this court filing. These are some of the photos of you and Vice President Pence from January 6th after you were whisked out of the Senate chamber. Does your memory align with how Jack Smith says things played out that day?
I think that the filing, from what I've read, is consistent with testimony that was offered and consistent with the way the events played out. And I think it's also candidly consistent with the way the vice president told it in his own memoir in his book.
Now, you spoke to the grand jury investigating Trump's efforts to overturn the election. Were there other key moments during that period that didn't make it into this special counsel's filing?
Well, you know, I think that there's obviously a lot of focus on the day of January 6th, and I think that this was obviously an effort over several weeks. And I think that, from my personal perspective, believe that once the Electoral College had acted on December 14th, that much of this would sort of dissipate. And I think when it didn't, it became clear that the focus would be on the vice president's actions on January 6th. And so those last few weeks were certainly, you know, more intense in deliberations between the president's office and the vice president's office. But you know, I think there's some pieces that probably aren't told because they were probably considered to be at this point protected because of the Supreme Court ruling of official activities. In other words, I think there's probably a lot of Mark Meadows' testimony that is yet to be unearthed from this, whereas I think you're looking at not wanting to trip over that potential disqualification. So much of what's released in this filing is things that are considered to be campaign activities. And again, I think that the president probably heard his case when he dismissed his own White House counsel from many of these conversations,